Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it like a therapist, not a wife. Let's stop touching until we reconnect. I remember standing in our kitchen, still wearing my turnout gear, soot on my hands, the smell of smoke in my jacket. I just pulled a kid out of a burning duplex an hour earlier. My heart was still pounding, adrenaline still humming, and she was talking about connection like it was a weekend project. My name's Ryan Keller. I'm 38. Firefighter, Engine Company 12, in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've seen people lose everything in seconds: homes, lives, families. You learn fast that what's gone usually stays gone. When Emma said those words, I knew something inside us had already burned out. We'd been married 8 years. She's a physical therapist, calm voice, perfect posture, the kind of person who writes gratitude lists and color codes her planner. I used to admire that control. Lately, it just felt like distance dressed up as discipline. That night, she slept facing the wall. I lay there watching the red glow from the alarm clock slide across her back. The air between us felt heavy, like smoke after the fire's out, but the smell still lingers. The next morning, she left early for the clinic. I made coffee, black, poured it into my old travel mug from Dunkin', the one she used to steal on her late mornings. When I got to the station, the guys were already joking, the TV blaring some morning show. I laughed when they did, but my head was somewhere else. I told myself she was tired, overworked, that maybe we just needed space. But then she started working late. Extra clients, she said. New patient recovering from knee surgery. Young guy, tech job, anxious but determined. She said his name like it meant something, like a cause she'd taken on. 2 weeks later, I noticed she'd stopped checking her phone around me. No smile when I came home from a 24-hour shift. Just questions about groceries and bills, said in that same soft, clinical tone she used with her patients. One night, after another of her late sessions, I saw a text light up on her phone while it charged on the counter. Just a name. Eli. No heart emoji. No words. Just the name and a photo of a therapy table, 2 coffee cups beside it. I didn't touch her phone. Didn't need to. I've seen too many burned foundations to know what collapsed structures look like. That night, she told me again, we just need to slow down, Ryan. Find each other emotionally before we rush back physically. I said, connection doesn't pause. It dies. She turned away. And for the first time, I didn't try to stop her. Firefighters learn to live in silence between alarms. You eat, train, wait, and when the siren hits, you move before you think. I started to treat my marriage the same way, like another call I couldn't predict but had to be ready for. Days passed, then weeks. She came home later each night, always tired, always smelling faintly of eucalyptus oil and antiseptic wipes. When she talked about work, her voice softened in ways it didn't for me anymore. He's making real progress, she'd say. I'm proud of him. The way she said him sat wrong in my chest. One Saturday morning, I drove to the grocery store, stopped at the Starbucks next door for her favorite caramel macchiato. Thought maybe I'd surprise her at the clinic. When I pulled into the parking lot, her car was there. Through the glass, I saw her laughing, shoulders relaxed, hand brushing someone's arm as he leaned on crutches. Tall guy, maybe 30, messy hair, wearing a gray hoodie with a startup logo. Eli. Even from a distance, I could see the spark she used to save for me. I didn't go in. Just sat in the truck watching the steam from my coffee fade into the air. A rookie once told me that fire doesn't just destroy, it reveals. Burns away the surface and shows what's underneath. Sitting there, I finally saw what had been hiding under months of polite smiles and clinical distance. That night, she came home late again. I asked if she'd eaten. She said yes, grabbed her phone, and disappeared into the bedroom. I stayed on the couch, scrolling through old photos on my iPhone. Camping trips, anniversaries, her birthday dinner at Olive Garden. In every picture, we were touching somehow. Her hand on my arm around her waist. Physical proof of connection. Now there was nothing. At work, the guys noticed I was quieter than usual. Captain Miller said I was haunting the place like a ghost. Maybe I was. My shifts became my escape. The sirens, the heat, the danger, they made sense. Fire is honest. It tells you exactly what it wants. One night, after a long call downtown, I got home past midnight. The house was dark. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message preview lit up the screen. "You helped me more than you know." From Eli. I turned off the light, left the phone where it was, and went to bed. The distance between us felt colder than any fire I'd ever put out. By winter, the silence between us had become a language of its own. We moved around each other like co-workers sharing a small office, polite, efficient, empty. She spent more time at the clinic. I spent more time at the station. The house became just a stopover between shifts. One night, I came home early. The lights were off, but her car was in the driveway. I walked inside quietly, out of habit. Her voice carried from the kitchen. She was on the phone, speaking in a tone I hadn't heard in months. Gentle, light, full of warmth. She said his name. Not Mr. Sanders, the way she called her patients, but Eli. No title, no distance. Just intimacy disguised as care. She told him to stay positive. Said she was proud of how far he'd come. Then she laughed softly. Said he should take it easy and not push too hard. The kind of thing she used to say to me after tough shifts. The words hit harder than any flame I'd walked through. I stood in the dark hall, listening, until the call ended. Then I went upstairs, packed a duffel bag, and wrote a note. Just one line. "You heal other people's bodies, but ignore your own wounds." I left it on the counter beside her mug and car keys. At the firehouse, the guys didn't ask why I was there between shifts. They knew better than to ask. I told them I needed quiet, and the dorm upstairs was empty. They let me stay. Days blurred together, calls, drills, silence. I ran extra miles after every shift, lifted heavier, slept less. The rhythm was clean, predictable. 2 weeks later, I saw her name flash on my phone. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short. She said she was worried, that she didn't understand what had happened, that we could talk. I didn't reply. Talking had become her way of avoiding truth. A month passed before I heard from her again. This time it was a text. She said the patient had been discharged, that she missed me, that she was ready to reconnect. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I locked the phone, set it face down on the table, and went back to cleaning my gear. Some fires aren't meant to be put out. They're meant to burn everything down to what's real. Spring came slow that year, gray and wet. The kind of weather that makes everything feel half awake. I kept my distance. Lived at the station, worked extra shifts, filled the silence with motion. The guys stopped asking about Emma. I think they could tell I wasn't the same. You can smell smoke even after the fire's out, and I carried that smell with me. One night, I was coming back from a late call. We'd pulled an older man out of a house fire on the east side. Burned hands, mild smoke inhalation. The paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, and I felt that old rush again. The simple clarity of doing something that mattered. When I got back to the station, my phone buzzed. A message from Emma. She said she was sorry for everything. That she'd made mistakes, but hadn't crossed any lines. That she just cared too much about helping people. I read it twice, then put the phone face down. Caring too much is how people justify everything. I'd seen it before. Neighbors running back into burning homes because they thought they could save something already gone. Most never made it back out. A week later, she showed up at the station. She waited by my truck, the one I'd parked behind the bays, a Ford F-150 I'd owned since before we married. When I stepped outside, she looked smaller than I remembered. Her voice shook when she said she missed me, that she wanted to fix things. I said nothing. She asked if we could talk somewhere private. I nodded once, out of courtesy, and we walked down the street to a small diner near the station. She said she'd been lonely, that her work had blurred the lines. She said Eli reminded her of me before the uniform, before the distance. I stirred my coffee, listening without expression. She reached for my hand, but I didn't move. She said she'd ended all contact with him, that it was never physical. I looked at her then, really looked. The woman across from me wasn't my wife anymore, not in the way that mattered. She was someone explaining her own weakness like it was compassion. When the check came, I paid it, stood up, and said, quietly, "You can't rebuild something that never stopped burning." Then I left her sitting there, hands folded, eyes wide, as if she'd finally felt the heat. After that night at the diner, I didn't hear from her for almost a month. The space between us finally felt real. No tension, no waiting, just absence. I worked, trained, and slept in the station dorm. The guys started calling me the monk. I didn't correct them. There's a peace in isolation if you lean into it hard enough. Then one Friday morning, we got called to a car accident on the highway. A delivery truck had clipped a sedan, sending it into a guardrail. We pulled a young man out with a fractured leg and concussion. I remember the way he kept saying thank you, over and over, through gritted teeth. Gratitude sounds different when it comes from pain. A week later, I was off duty when my friend Matt texted me. Said he'd messed up his shoulder during a climb and needed a ride to the clinic. I didn't think much of it until he mentioned which one, Cedar Valley Rehab. Emma's workplace. I said I'd drive him. When we walked in, the smell hit first. That clean mix of disinfectant and mint oil. The same smell that used to linger on her clothes when she came home. The receptionist smiled and said the therapist would be right out. I was standing by the window when she appeared. White coat, hair pulled back, calm face. For a moment, she froze. Then her expression softened like nothing had ever happened. She said my name like a question. I nodded once but didn't answer. She turned to Matt, guiding him toward the exam room, her voice steady but her hands trembling. I stayed in the waiting area, pretending to scroll through my phone. From where I stood, I could see her working, gentle, professional, detached, the way she used to be before it all turned personal. When Matt's session ended, she followed him out, handing over paperwork. She looked at me, hoping I'd say something. I didn't. I just took the forms, thanked her, and walked out. Outside, the air was cold, sharp. Matt asked if that was my ex. I said, something like that. He didn't ask more, and I didn't look back. Some connections don't break. They fade until silence becomes the only language left between you. After that day at the clinic, something in me shifted. Seeing her in that white coat again didn't hurt. It clarified. She looked smaller somehow, like a version of herself still trying to control every moment, every feeling. But control doesn't heal what's already broken. It just hides the wound until it festers. Back at the station, I threw myself into the work. My world became fire, steel, and silence. Every call, every alarm, every smoke-filled hallway. Each one felt like a clean slate. There's a purity and danger that life doesn't give you. Fire doesn't lie. It doesn't pretend. One night, while restocking the truck, I saw her number flash on my phone again. I didn't pick up. The message that followed was long. She said she'd seen me at the clinic, that I'd looked distant, different. She said she missed my steadiness, the way I used to ground her when her work drained her. She said she realized she'd been searching for validation, not connection. I read it once, deleted it, and went back to work. People think closure comes with words. It doesn't. It comes with quiet decisions. Weeks passed. She started sending shorter messages, updates about the house, my mail, the dog we once talked about adopting but never did. Each one felt like a test, a small attempt to see if I'd soften. I didn't. Then one afternoon, I got a call from Captain Miller. Said the chief wanted me to help train new recruits in a fire behavior course out at the academy. I took it. Teaching felt like the right kind of silence. No emotion, just knowledge passed on. The morning I left for the academy, I drove past our old neighborhood. Her car was in the driveway, curtains drawn. For a second, I thought about stopping. Then I remembered the look on her face at the diner, the one that said she still believed she could explain her way out of guilt. I kept driving. The engine hummed steady beneath me, the road stretching open ahead. Sometimes the cleanest break isn't a fight. It's the moment you stop turning back. Training the rookies was like stepping into a mirror of my younger self. Hungry, reckless, full of noise. They wanted stories, adrenaline, heroism. I gave them procedures, timing, oxygen management. They didn't understand that fire isn't about bravery. It's about control and chaos, the ability to move steady when everything screams at you to panic. At night, when the training grounds went quiet, I'd sit on the tailgate of the truck, watching the embers fade from the live-burn exercises. I thought about Emma sometimes, not as my wife, but as a person still trapped in her own emotional fire, still thinking she could heal others while ignoring her own damage. One night, after a long session, I drove to a nearby diner for dinner. Same chain where we'd once talked about our first vacation, back when things were simple. A waitress in her 20s refilled my coffee, said I looked like I'd had a long day. I told her I was fine. It wasn't true, but it was close enough. When I checked my phone, there was another message from Emma. She wrote that she'd been going to therapy, that she was learning about boundaries and emotional transference. She said she understood now that what happened with her patient had crossed lines she didn't see at the time. She said she wasn't asking for forgiveness, just a chance to talk face to face. I didn't respond that night. Instead, I reread my old note to her, the one I left months ago on the counter. You heal other people's bodies, but ignore your own wounds. It still felt true, maybe truer than when I wrote it. A few days later, she sent one more message. Said she'd accepted a job in another state. A clean start. She thanked me for being patient once, for being steady when she couldn't be. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, because I finally understood she needed to go. When the rookies graduated a week later, I drove home past the clinic. The parking lot was empty. Her name was gone from the door. I parked for a minute, looked at the blank glass, and realized silence had done what words never could. It ended things without breaking them. Summer came in thick and slow, the kind of heat that sticks to you even after sunset. I started spending my off days near the lake, running drills with the volunteers, helping maintain the rescue boat. Work kept me steady. The sound of the engine, the weight of rope and steel, it grounded me in ways words never did. One afternoon, I got a call from Captain Miller. Said there was an opening for lieutenant next quarter and asked if I'd consider it. I said I'd think about it, but deep down, I already knew I wasn't chasing rank anymore. I wanted quiet. I'd earned it. That evening, I stopped by the station gym after hours. The place was empty, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. As I lifted, I thought about how many nights I'd spent there trying to burn off emotion like it was fuel. It hit me then. What Emma had called distance, I called balance. She'd craved connection to feel alive. I'd needed silence to survive. A week later, I ran into one of her old co-workers at a grocery store. She said Emma had moved to Nashville, taken a position at a private rehab clinic. Said she looked happier, calmer. I nodded and thanked her. It didn't sting. If anything, it felt like the final ember going cold. That night, I sat on my porch with a cold beer, the radio low, the city lights distant. The phone buzzed, a new message. Unknown number. The text read, "I'm grateful for you, even if I never said it right." I knew it was her. There was no name, no question, just those words. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I deleted the message, finished my beer, and turned off the porch light. Some things don't need a reply. Some goodbyes work best when they stay unspoken. The next morning, I got up before dawn, ran 5 miles along the quiet streets, and watched the horizon shift from gray to gold. Every step felt lighter. The fire had finally burned itself out. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't miss the smoke. By the end of summer, the city felt smaller. My days followed the same rhythm: shift, gym, sleep, repeat. It wasn't emptiness. It was structure, the kind that keeps you from thinking too much. Sometimes I'd see couples at the firehouse fundraiser dinners, wives laughing, hands on their husbands' shoulders, and it hit me how different connection looks when it's real. It's quiet, unperformed. It doesn't need fixing or saving. It just exists. One night, we got a call to a small apartment fire near the downtown district. Nothing major, kitchen blaze from a forgotten pan, but enough smoke to flood the hallways. Inside, I found a young woman crouched by the window, holding a baby, terrified. I carried them both out, wrapped them in a blanket, and she kept whispering thank you. Her hands trembled, the same way Emma's used to when she tried to hold on to something slipping away. Later, after the flames were out, I sat on the curb, breathing the cooled night air. My captain handed me a water bottle and said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. Maybe I had. Not Emma, not her shadow, just the memory of who I used to be before I started confusing silence with numbness. Back at the station, I took a long shower, let the water scald the soot off my arms. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see a man who'd been left. I saw a man who'd finally stopped chasing something that didn't want to be saved. That weekend, I drove out to the lake again. Sat in the truck watching the water shift under the wind. I realized how much time I'd spent trying to understand her need to feel needed, her quiet rescues, her soft boundaries that blurred until they broke. But maybe it wasn't about understanding. Maybe it was about acceptance. Some people heal others to avoid healing themselves. I started the engine, pulled onto the road, and let the tires hum against the asphalt. The past wasn't a wound anymore. Just a scar, proof of survival, not pain. And sometimes, that's enough to call it closure. Fall came with colder mornings and quieter nights. The air smelled like smoke again, but this time it was from bonfires, not burning homes. I'd moved into a small apartment near the station, 1 bedroom, brick walls, a view of the city skyline. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No shared closet, no ghost of another life. Just clean space and quiet. One afternoon, Captain Miller stopped by. He said the lieutenant position was officially open and that the board wanted my answer. I told him I'd take it. Not because of ambition, but because I finally had the clarity for responsibility again. He nodded, said I'd earned it. Maybe I had. That night, I stopped by Target for a few things. New bedding, some plates, a lamp. Mundane purchases, but standing in that aisle, I realized how peaceful ordinary could be. No tension, no waiting for someone to love me right. Just the sound of fluorescent lights and the weight of a simple decision. A week later, I was at the gym when an old firefighter buddy, Luke, mentioned he'd seen Emma. Said she was doing community rehab work with veterans down in Tennessee. Said she looked good. I told him I was glad. And I meant it. That evening, as I walked back to my truck, the sky turned a deep orange, the same color as fire at its calmest. I thought about the night she'd said, "Let's stop touching until we reconnect." I understood now what she'd really meant. She wasn't asking for space. She was testing whether absence could make love stronger. But connection doesn't pause. It dies quietly, one unreturned gesture at a time. When I got home, I sat by the window, lights off, watching the city. My phone was on the table, silent. I didn't need it to ring. I didn't need closure or apology. She'd chosen her way of healing. I'd chosen mine. Before bed, I scribbled something on a note and tucked it into my wallet. She withheld touch. I withheld presence. Now the distance is permanent. The next morning, the station alarm sounded at 5:42. I pulled on my gear, climbed into the truck, and felt the weight of peace settle where pain used to live. Some fires end in smoke, others in silence. This one ended in both. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.